This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Coming up on this Thursday's program, we start with a two-segment conversation on the current labor crisis in agriculture. K-State Agricultural Policy Specialist Jenny Ifft and Kansas Livestock Association Chief Executive Officer Matt Teagarden lead the discussion on policy issues such as the H-2A visa program. We are also joined by Ryan and Laura Haffner, owners of High Plains Harvesting, who contribute insight into the hardships that they face as business owners when it comes to finding and securing labor during these difficult times. We end with K-State entomologist Raymond Cloyd. In this week's horticulture segment, he is encouraging homeowners to clean up yard debris and be ready to deal with several pest invaders this fall. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now, and we are talking about the labor crisis that we're currently experiencing. It's a huge issue, not only in agriculture, of course, but across the United States and really all industries and sectors. And to cover this complex topic, we have joining us several guests today that can provide testament to this issue from not only a policy standpoint, but from personal experience as well as business owners. So first and foremost, we have joining us Jenny Ifft. She is a K-State agricultural policy specialist that listeners are used to hearing quite often across the airwaves on this program. And then we're also joined by Matt Teagarden. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kansas Livestock Association. So Jenny and Matt are going to be really talking about policy a lot today. And then we're also joined by Ryan Haffner and Laura Haffner. They are owners of High Plains Harvesting. And Laura also serves as a board member for the Kansas Farm Bureau. So first and foremost, thank you all so much for joining the conversation today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, Jenny, we're talking about the labor crisis. So I guess first and foremost, let's talk about what currently is the main issue that we're facing right now.
So generally, there's difficulty finding workers and keeping workers employed, both in agriculture, but also in rural businesses, in cities, for firms, at all levels. So this is, you could say it's a national crisis in a way, but we're definitely feeling it in agriculture.
Absolutely. And from what I understand, this has been an issue that it hasn't happened overnight, obviously. It's kind of been a culmination of things over time. So what really has led to this major issue that we're facing now?
So today, the economy is doing pretty well. Some would argue it's overheating. That's probably a topic for another episode. But we have a pretty strong economy right now. We have low unemployment. So I would say that's the main cause right now. Also, if you want to go big picture, the U.S. is a developed or an advanced economy. So once an economy gets to this point, labor shortages are naturally going to become more common.
And then, like I mentioned before, policy is a major part of this, right? I feel like labor and policy kind of go hand in hand these days, and how a lot of the things in our country are done. So in terms of policy, Matt and Jenny, if you guys want to jump in on this, what really are we facing right now policy-wise that are causing some issues?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I think it's multifaceted in rural Kansas and rural areas across the country. I think this is not a new issue. This has been ongoing. COVID changed the dynamic, I think, and we had disruption then, but I think we're quickly back to where there's far more jobs than there are available workers. And so as we look at that, I think then thinking about policy and ways in which we could address the issue, one of the things that we've been really focused on is a more effective, more efficient guest worker program. And for livestock producers, primarily the members that we represent, we need year-round access. The H-2A program has done a lot of good, but it's seasonal. And we know that we don't feed cattle or milk cows seasonally. It's every day, year-round. And so really from a policy standpoint, I think that's been our focus is can we secure changes to that H-2A program that would allow for year-round workers and really increase the number of visas available. So I think there's two pieces there. There's some movement at the national level in Congress that is encouraging, and we're engaged in particular now on the Senate side and talking about our priorities with our two senators and more broadly agricultural priorities with all senators.
Absolutely. An important part of what KLA does as an organization, of course, is kind of working with those people involved in our local government and beyond. And you mentioned the H-2A policy there. So if listeners aren't familiar with that, can you kind of break that down to what that really is?
So it is a guest worker program. And so employers, and there's requirements, and Ryan and Laura, I'm sure, know more details about all the paperwork and all of that. But in general, it is a guest worker program that allows folks from overseas, outside the U.S., to come for a season and do agricultural work. So it's ag-focused, but it's specific jobs, and it is, today, seasonal. And so it fits for a lot of ag-type work that we need to get done, and it's been important for agriculture to get that work done, but it is limited in scope, and so doesn't fit all of the jobs that we need to fill today.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, obviously the livestock industry, a huge component of that. It's something that's done all year round, not seasonally like you mentioned. And Jenny, in terms of some of the other policy things outside of H-2A that we're currently facing right now, what are some of those other issues?
So first of all, once you become an employer, there's payroll, there's taxes, there's some standard regulations that everybody has to deal with. There's about 15,000 farms in Kansas that hire farm workers, and about over 40,000 farm workers as of the 2017 Ag Census. So there's a lot of farms that are just dealing with this basic level of regulation that any employer has to. Matt touched on the immigration issues. Right now, there's not enough Americans to fill all jobs in agriculture. That's what the H-2A program is designed for. And you do actually see nationally, when areas have low unemployment, when local labor markets are tight, you see more farms using H-2A. So big picture, it is working as intended. But there's also a lot of state-level regulations. This isn't necessarily a Kansas-specific issue or what we're dealing with, but minimum wage, overtime, unionization, all are something that farmers across the country are dealing with in a lot of states. So definitely a lot of tricky policy issues.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring in Ryan and Laura here and kind of ask about your experience as business owners in Kansas, kind of what some of the difficulties you have faced in the labor sector, what those have really looked like.
So I have to agree with what Jennifer and Matt have both said, that, you know, there is a labor shortage and it's difficult to find folks. And I think we use a statistic that there's approximately, 2% of us in the United States that are involved in production agriculture. And so as we've seen this mass exodus from our small town communities, and as you said, the labor market's tight because we have a low employment rate, it makes it continually difficult to be able to find ag workers who, A, are familiar with agriculture in general, or B, who aren't already employed with somebody in general. So we need the H-2A program to help fill in those gaps that we're not able to find, those local workers here at home.
Yeah, for sure. In the H-2A program, at our business, we're, say, 75% seasonal, 25% not. So, but therefore, it fits us about 75% of the time. So it fits us better than some people in livestock. But we are not completely seasonal, though, either. So we still struggle. Our business and a lot of grain farms and just a lot of agriculture operations in general still need some level of year-round employment. And then, within the program, there's lots of regulatory things that scare a lot of people off. We essentially have no choice. We've had to adapt, and a lot of people in our small industry have. But at a greater farming perspective, it's the details and the regulations of it really scare a lot of people off that could benefit from it. And we just have a major labor shortage in agriculture.
I think that's a good point that he made, that it is a very cumbersome program. There's a lot of benefits about it. But when we're thinking about farm families, we are the workers, we are the owners, we are the HR, we have a hand in everything that we do. And when you're required to do all those things in addition to day-to-day operations, it's very cumbersome and very difficult to keep up with all the different rules and regulations, because labor is just one of many in the hat of the regulations that we have to follow.
Difficult situation for sure. Like you said, one that you guys face out of necessity because there's just no other options really in terms of finding workers to meet those needs that you guys have as a business. But in terms of what's really worked, you've mentioned that isn't just seasonal, it's a year-round type of thing. So in that 25% of your business, what have you done that has worked for you guys specifically?
To say what's worked, a lot of times we just have to wait. It doesn't work is what it is we're sacrificing time out of the year that could and should be productive, and sometimes we're just not because we don't have the people for it. So we try to plan and organize for when we do have our labor and try to make the most out of that. But it's not an ideal thing, and I think there's an opportunity cost. We could be progressing as a business and as a total industry within Kansas and the United States, but because of it, we're being limited and not working to our full potential as a sector of the economy.
And that has to be frustrating, right? I mean, as a business owner, you're trying to grow, you're trying to expand, you're trying to put your heart and soul into your business a lot of the times, as agricultural businesses do, and you're limited. 25% of your business operation, you're limited in that way.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, also we're limited on who we can employ during those times. We have some workers who have been very faithful and loyal to us, and there's a mutual benefit there. And, they're also, I guess, for lack of better terms, being harmed as well because their season's cut short due to the regulations, to remain.
Sure. Great example of how this policy really affects all that are involved. And we're going to cut to a short break here in a moment, but this conversation on the labor crisis doesn't end here. We will continue to hear from these individuals with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are continuing our conversation on the labor crisis, picking back up with starting comments from Ryan Haffner of High Plains Harvesting.
There are people out there that want to work here year-round. They want to make a career out of working in agriculture in the United States, and they really can't. Like, they're sent home for a few months out of the year or forced to go to another employer. So there's a way around this labor shortage, or I don't know completely around it, but we could be better set up with our labor in agriculture than we are.
And I guess that really emphasizes the issue here is that there is obviously policy that is being used, but that policy isn't allowing for the maximum productivity that our agricultural businesses could potentially have. And with that in mind, Matt, is there anything that has worked specifically for your members within KLA?
Well, from a foreign labor, immigration kind of related, if you look at some of our diverse operations that have livestock enterprise, also farming enterprise. So, if you look at the totality of kind of the entire labor force that they need, we have had members that are able to take advantage of the H-2A program for that farming side, that seasonal side of their business. And so, that frees up maybe some native labor to work on the livestock side. They've taken advantage of the TN visa program, which is more of a specialized, higher skilled, even degreed, to the extent degrees are similar in, outside the U.S., but take advantage of some folks with some specific skills that match up with needs on their livestock operations. And the other thing I think that is part of this, and this is the case whether, you're hiring Kansans or Americans or bringing in folks from other countries, is thinking about the needs of today's labor force. And it's changing. I was talking to a member a while back about labor, and that's a common conversation these days. And this member was talking about, you just can't find folks willing to work 7 days a week anymore. And I laughed because I thought he was joking, but he was serious. And I get it. The work is 7 days a week. It doesn't stop on Saturday or Sunday. But I think part of we're going to have to recognize that, at least in these times, we may have to rethink how we structure the jobs and recognize that we're not going to be able to ask folks to work 7 days a week, week after week after week, and expect them to stay or offset that in some way. That's unfortunately, I think, the reality. And so the conversation went on. I said, okay, maybe let's think about how we could get 6 days a week and start there versus the expectation of somebody coming to the feed yard or the dairy 7 days a week and continue to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is, working in agriculture as business owners and people connected to agriculture, we all know this. It's hard work. And like you said, times are changing in terms of what people are expecting in their working lives, what they want to do, things like that. And sometimes as business owners, I guess you have to change your own expectations too in a lot of ways. Have you guys found that?
I would say us as business owners, we have tons of motivation, right? We have it all on the line. Employees, it's an employee friendly type market out there. We try to be a good employer, but employees, even H2A, even foreign workers, I mean, they have a pick from all kinds of people to work for, and they get to kind of choose their conditions, and they have a lot of choice. And like Matt was saying about working with the hours and things like that, we do have to be more careful kind of how we present our job and handle our business and how it suits the employees. And sometimes we don't maybe all like that, but that is a reality of what we're facing more now, and that's just the way it is, whether we like it or not. But employees have a lot of choices. They can and will move around. It's just different than it used to be as far as people staying somewhere for an entire career.
And I don't know if there's a lot of familiarity around the H2A program, but there are a lot of rules and regulations in place about what employers can and can't do. So maybe we want to touch on the fact that, there is a stated wage rate, and there's requirements regarding housing and transportation and how do they get to the United States and where do they live once they're here, and if I provide them vehicles and stuff. So I would like to clarify that this isn't just these people show up and boom, here they are, but we have a very high bar that is set for us of rules and regulations that we need to make sure that our employees are truly members of our team and supported in ways that they need once they arrive as guests in our country.
Absolutely. A great clarifying point for sure. And Jenny, you look like you want to make an additional comment here.
Today we have the H2A program, which is a guest worker program. But I want to make the point that this is not unique to the U.S., and it's not unique internationally. It's not always called a guest worker program, but over the past 200 years, we've had migrants from Asia, from Mexico, from Central and South America, and from Europe who have met those seasonal labor needs in agriculture. And it wasn't necessarily any less contentious back then than it is today. But again, this is not a U.S. specific issue. In Europe, you have immigrants from in Western Europe, you have immigrants from Eastern Europe working in agriculture. In Mexico, you might have immigrants from Central America. So this sort of, use of migrant labor for seasonal agricultural work is not unique to the U.S. It's not new. I also know that a lot of rural businesses are using guest workers. So I've heard of cooperatives using H2A, H2B, other special visa programs. So it definitely goes beyond the farm gate.
I'll just expand on that just a little bit. And, my experience with H2A workers, we have a lot of workers that have worked for us, but also worked in other countries as well. And although I don't know all the details about how they get into the other countries, I do know that I've heard many times, almost always, it's easier for them to go work in other countries. Canada has a very tight labor market. A lot of our employees have worked in Canada before and find the visa program, if you will, quicker and easier to go to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, other developed economies that have a tight labor market. And the U.S. with our guest worker program is the most difficult. It's difficult for them and it's difficult for us. It's like pulling teeth to try to use it.
As he said, it is cumbersome, and I fully believe there should be things in place to protect our guests here in the nation as well as, the employer too. There's a balance there. But if we become too cumbersome with, over-regulation, I think we lose that balance, and we also lose our ability to be able to compete in the world marketplace.
All excellent points, and ones that once again just point to the significant role that policy plays here in maintaining the stability of the agricultural industry in some ways, especially in ensuring that the industry and businesses in rural communities can find workers through programs like H2A to address these labor needs, honestly. And as we wrap up here, I'm thinking ahead. I'm like, more resources, more information. So if listeners are tuning in and they're looking for more information about current policy that we currently have in place in the United States, maybe even Kansas specific, where can they find that at?
Well, yeah, so we tend to kind of work individually with members who are looking at this. One of the things that we're looking at, I participated in a webinar that USDA put on about 2 weeks ago now. But USDA is looking at options for supporting H2A programs and others. And I think one of the pieces of that is this housing component. There's this housing requirement, and it doesn't matter who you're hiring. If there's no housing available, they're not going to come and work for you. And so there may be ways to capitalize on some of these programs and support, whether it's KLA, Kansas Farm Bureau, Department of Ag. I think all of those organizations and others recognize this issue, that there is more than just a need for workers. There's the infrastructure to support those workers that's really key. I went through Dodge City yesterday, and the new Hilmar plant, they're moving dirt for that plant there south of Dodge City, the cheese plant. There's another, I think, 200 and some workers that we collectively are going to have to find somewhere. They're going to need housing and other things. And so it's one of those things where I think many of us need to work together to solve this issue and find ways, maybe creatively, to address the issue.
Absolutely. An excellent point. The infrastructure behind things, especially in rural communities, as we're talking about these jobs in agriculture, they often are in these rural communities. So need for housing, need for childcare in some situations, I know is a huge problem as well. So all great issues, and hopefully things that our listeners can walk away and contemplate on themselves and potentially reach out to their local officials and things like that to bring up some of these issues and hopefully advocate for themselves in a lot of ways. But a great discussion today. I can't thank you all enough for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, addressing the current labor crisis in agriculture, that was K-State Ag Policy Specialist Jenny Ifft, Matt Teagarden, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Kansas Livestock Association, and Ryan and Laura Haffner, who own High Plains Harvesting. We're about to cut to a short break here momentarily, but when we return, we will be hearing from K-State entomologist Raymond Cloyd for this week's horticulture segment. He's joining us to encourage homeowners to clean up their yard debris and prepare to deal with several pests this fall. Once again, that and more is still ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. As the weather turns cooler, insect pests may be searching for places to overwinter or looking to invade homes where it's warmer. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd discusses how to reduce the risk of that happening in your yard and home. Raymond, this is that time of the year when we start thinking about doing some sanitation, and that really means getting rid of all that debris that's out there.
Yeah, Jeff, fall and winter is always an excellent time to remove debris, branches, dead vegetables, any type of material that is not wanted, because these are areas where some insects overwinter. So sanitation, so you want to either take that material, put it into a compost pile that's active, or burn it or dispose of it as soon as possible. So that's always, when we talk about pest management, that's always like the first line of defense is sanitation, removing weeds and debris, and that will alleviate, not eliminate, but alleviate problems probably for next year.
We hear that term overwinter quite commonly. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. All insects and mites have they go through the wintertime in sort of a different life stage, and the basic means is how they survive the wintertime. For example, bagworms. Bagworms overwinter as eggs in the female bags. Squash bugs overwinter as adults in debris. So it really depends what insect it is, but they can overwinter as eggs, larvae or nymphs, pupa or adults. And that's just basically how they survive the winter. And that's a large topic that I've given presentations on over the time period, but very complex. But insects have evolved various mechanisms whether it be freeze tolerance or avoidance to avoid getting killed during the wintertime.
And speaking of that, we're starting to see some of those home invaders move from outdoors to indoors.
Yeah, this is the time of year we get the calls about the Asian ladybird beetle congregating on the south side of buildings and moving inside. Then we have box elder bugs, and then we have elm leaf beetles, crickets, millipedes coming into the home. The best thing is vacuum them. Of course, they're going to die because the humidity is just too low for them. You can seal cracks and crevices in the foundations or the home, or just vacuum them up, put them back outside when they enter. Most of these insects and mites or related arthropods are not really going to harm you. The Asian ladybird beetle might bite you, but they're not vectoring or transmitting any disease. So this is just the common, and because of that, we have seen studies that show that homes are cleaner because people are vacuuming more to deal with the Asian ladybird beetle. And of course, they congregate in window seals and to stay there for the entire winter time. But if they're an annoyance, just vacuum them up and dispose of them outside.
And often we see them because they have actually died inside.
Some of them do die inside, and that is a great point because there's been some really nice studies to show that when Asian ladybird beetles die behind wall voids, the dust actually can instigate asthma in children. So again, that's another reason that you want to vacuum them up and remove them as soon as possible, so you don't have these aggregations of dead Asian ladybird beetles in the home, and as they decompose, or even rats or rodents that eat on them and they stimulate the dust in the air, and if somebody's sensitive or has asthma, it could be problematic.
If you have to do any treating during the wintertime, what can we use? Dormant oils, is that an option?
Yeah, there are a series of oils. Let me explain. There's the horticultural oils or the summer oils you can apply spring, summer, and fall, and then there are the dormant oils. And the difference is based on the unsulfonated residues of the oil, basically how it's processed. So these Volk oils are dormant oils. They're mineral-based, too. They apply them in the wintertime primarily to fruit trees, trees that are deciduous, to kill insects and mites that overwinter on the trees and shrubs. For example, the European red mite, which is a problem on apples, you can spray dormant oil to kill the eggs that are overwintering in the bark and crevices of the bark. And some other insects and mites overwinter on the plant, and that's for dormant oils. And oils, of course, are suffocants. They smother them or prevent the exchange of gases. And that can minimize or mitigate problems for next year. So think about dormant oils. Go to your garden center, look for a Volk oil or a mineral oil. And if you do have fruit trees or trees that have lost their leaves and they do get pest problems, that might be an option to think about.
And, of course, if they need more information, they can always just do a simple search and find some fact sheets.
Yes, Jeff, the newsletter is pretty much on an as-needed basis, but we do have a whole plethora of extension publication fact sheets available. You can actually go to our website, Department of Entomology, Kansas State, and they're there. Or you can go to the bookstore. You'll contact your extension office in your county, and they will guide you. But most of these are available at the KSU bookstore, too.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd. Again, more information can be found online and at county and district extension offices. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.